Afternoon, and welcome to another great episode of Jeff and the Rabbi. I got to let everybody know, I get a text from Rabbi Freeman last night telling me about the topic, and I was a little upset. I got to admit, since I've been a little kid, my favorite football team is the Washington Redskins.
Really?
Yeah, and so Rabbi Freeman figured since it's the week after the Super Bowl, we'll go down that football line and talk about that. The whole topic today is, can I even like the Redskins anymore? Can I even say the Redskins? Is it offensive? Is it Lashon Hara? And that's kind of upsetting to me. So after hearing this, as often happens to me, I start to thinking.
Right.
So I started to thinking
Watch
last
out.
night. I know.
It's
when
getting
I start
dangerous
to
now.
thinking, everybody's got to duck and cover here. So I'm thinking last night, well, if the Redskins are offensive, and if that's Lashon Hara, what isn't? So last night I just spent my time on football. Listen, I get it. So we can just write off the Chiefs and the Redskins. They're gone. Forget about baseball. We don't talk about baseball now. But I'm thinking, if that's offensive, there's a lot of other football teams we got to do some work on if we want to be, politically correct and not Lashon Hara. So I start off with a couple teams I think I have some suggestions for that we should make some changes. First, you got the New York Giants. Come on, the New York Giants. How many short people are we offending in New York by talking about the New York Giants?
Right.
Not just that. What about the vertically challenged? Because I don't want to say overtly tall and awkward. I mean, what about those people? That's not right. So I did some research and found out the average American height for a man, I know that might be a problem as well, is 5'8". So I figure we'll call them the New York 5'8ers. Mm-hmm. Now, if for some reason some more Chinese or Japanese people move into New York in the next couple years and the height goes down, I hope that's not offensive, to say 5'6", we can change it to 5'6ers. But right now, we started with 5'8ers, and I think everybody would be happy that way.
Right.
Now, then I'm moving on a little bit. I get to the Lions, the Detroit Lions. Now, Detroit has Lions and the Tigers for their baseball team as well.
Right.
That's pretty offensive. If you think about it, a lion and a tiger is an aggressive, horrible, warlike animal, and it's implying savagery, destroying the weak, the young gazelle that's running around there.
I'll tell you the truth. I personally am more worried about the Pistons because the Pistons are going to destroy the environment, and they're bringing on global warming.
Oh, we'll get to that.
There's way too many Pistons around here.
We're going to get to that. I mean, I'm only talking football, but I'm with you here. Listen, I've just got started here. I need more than a half hour for just this intro here. So the Lions, we've got to change. I figured since Detroit and Michigan obviously like cats, less offensive would be the Detroit cuddly kittens. Mm-hmm. I think the Detroit, no one who could be upset with a cuddly kitten. Now, unless you have a cat allergy, which we're going to have to work on that. Right. I'm not sure about that. But we'll go with the Detroit cuddly kittens for both football and baseball. Then we go down to Texas. This is where I have the problem. The Cowboys. Come on, the Cowboys. Bottom line, easy way would just say the Cowboys and girls, because that would be fine. Everybody's included. But even in Texas, the new normal now, there are a couple people that aren't really sure if they're boys and they're girls right here. So is it the Cowboys? Is it the Cowgirls? We're just going to call them the Cow people. Mm-hmm. Now, luckily, thank goodness, the Houston Oilers moved out, because now I'm with you here. Them, forget about changing it. That was death penalty for that team. Anyone who would name their team after a fossil fuel.
Right.
Now, I thought, it'd be nice if we could change it, if they're still there, the Houston Green Renewable Energy Source, but death penalty, that's like fracking. Anything with a fossil fuel, and that's gone. Last one I want to get to, because this is the one I had the toughest time with, and that was with the San Francisco 49ers. We all know what a 49er is. It's one of these tough, rugged men that crossed the country back in 1849 to dig for gold. Obviously, too masculine, too rugged, that's out. But, they did bring their wives with them, to cook and clean, and that's obviously politically correct. So I guess we couldn't call them the 49ers and wives. And here's my biggest issue. It's San Francisco. You couldn't even say wives. You can't say husbands. You can't say wives, because we don't even know. In San Francisco, they're not really sure what they're going at. It could be men, women, cats, dogs. I'm not really sure. It's San Francisco. So what we came up with there is I did some research. The San Francisco's whatever the heck yars, because they're not really sure. So this is probably where we're going to end here. I can go on forever here, but this is probably where we're going to end here, and we're going to turn it back over to Rabbi Friedperson.
Yes, right.
That's right. Because I don't want to offend anybody with your name
Don't
either.
want to take any sides or anything like that.
I'm being very safe, because the last thing I want to be is offensive.
That's right. That's right. Wow.
So where am I going wrong here?
Well, I'll tell you the only problem that you've got, and that is that I don't think that you're looking at this from the perspective of the people that feel offended by the title Redskins. Now, I could say a lot of things. You could make a lot of arguments. The people who are calling the team the Redskins, I don't think anyone thinks too much about Indians.
No.
I don't think that they want to be offensive to Indians. I don't think they're trying to hurt anybody. I think they're trying to talk about, bravery and courage because they want their team to win and all that type of stuff.
That used to be a good thing.
That's right. However, this is the
hey,
interesting
I'm
part.
offended already with the how thing there.
Right, however, this is the interesting part. In the Torah, there is a commandment that says that you're not allowed to, I guess you'd call it in English, abuse people. And there is physical abuse, there is financial abuse, such as overcharging someone, taking advantage of a customer, and there is verbal abuse. It's in the Torah. So verbal abuse, ona'as devarim, abusive words. And one of the things that we have to watch out for, and this falls into the Lashon Hara category, as well as being abusive speech, is nicknames.
Really?
Yes, it is in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Code of Law. It says we should not use nicknames.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Not supposed to use nicknames because nicknames could be hurtful to the person, even if the one who's using the nickname does not think that he's being hurtful or doesn't intend to be hurtful at all. But if the person, like you call, guy's got red hair, so you call him Red.
Makes sense.
Right. Maybe the guy is sensitive about his red hair. I don't know why. I think it's nice red hair. It looks fun. The guy, you know the way it is. If you got red hair, you've been growing up all your life wishing you had black hair, Right. If you have black hair, you grow up all your wishing, looking in front of the mirror wishing you had red hair. That's the way people are. I don't know. Doesn't make any sense. Nothing wrong with red hair. I got nothing against red hair. But maybe the guy is sensitive about his red hair. So therefore, if you call him red, that makes him uptight. That's abusive. That doesn't mean that you're trying to be abusive. That doesn't mean you want to hurt the guy. You might even feel it's affectionate. He might be like the only guy in the crowd that has red hair.
Right.
But if you call him that, calling a person a name, giving a name specifically, calling a person by a nickname, as a matter of fact, very, very strong words, even says to the point that you risk losing your share in the world to come. Wow. That is tough talk.
That's very tough.
Yeah, it's really, really bad to use it. Now, the idea here is, and this gets us past really the Redskins, because the idea is really, I hear about this Redskin thing. I remember the Redskins since I was a little kid. Everyone knows the Redskins. Whoever connected Redskins with Indians? I mean, I don't even know if I made that connection in my mind, But nonetheless,
well, the picture behind us is an Indian with red skin.
It's an Indian, right? Yeah. So I guess and that was a caricature of as a matter of fact, as my grandmother used to say, when my brother and I would be beating each other up, and we had toy machine guns, and sometimes we would run out of ammunition and just start using the butt ends to slam each other and all that. Right. So my grandmother would scream at us, don't act like wild Indians. Right?
Okay.
Dad's grandmother used to say. I mean, luckily she's out of this world. Otherwise, she could probably be, locked up for hate speech or something. Anyway, the idea is that there was a caricature,
right?
And I think the Redskins logo was taken from that caricature. Although that's long past, no one pays any attention to it. Nonetheless, it really doesn't matter if there's a Redskin out there, meaning if there is a person who feels that he identifies with that.
Don't say Indian.
And that is talking about him, then he feels that's a nickname referring to him. He's uptight about it. We have to be sensitive to the feelings of the other person. So if I call the guy Red and he says, I don't like being called Red, it doesn't matter whether red is a pejorative or not.
So you're saying it's the same issue with the Cowboys. I mean, cowboy can be, hey, cowboy, that could be, it could have a derogatory term to it. Cowboy also, he shot up the Indians. He shot up a lot of people back then.
It's the same. Let's say I come in and I start calling you J-Boy.
Yep.
Hey, J-Boy. Okay? You don't like J-Boy.
I actually was called something similar to that as a kid. It was True Boy, but I wasn't for a while all the time. It was,
right.
Okay, well, that's
if
true.
you don't like it, for whatever reason, I don't mean anything, I have nothing, but you don't like it, I shouldn't use it. And that's why it says you shouldn't use nicknames altogether.
Sorry, Tex. I don't want to offend anybody.
No nicknames. But what it really is teaching us here is a higher level of sensitivity. Always, that's what the Torah is always pushing you, to a higher level of sensitivity. And it especially when it comes to someone's name, which is very much tied into their identity. So people get very sensitive about their identity and how they are referred to. How you call me is something that means a lot to me. It's important for me to be addressed in a certain way. And because it's important to me, then you have to respect that. Because we're all commanded not to use abusive speech.
See, I understand clearly abusive speech, but what if to that person it's not abusive? I mean, I like being called Red. It's a term of endearment, says the guy.
So if the guy says, I like that, it's interesting. I don't hear them talking about the Kansas City Chiefs.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm assuming that's because those are chiefs. Right? Those are like leaders.
Right. Where the Braves or the Redskins really are not.
Right. So, but Redskins, I think is like trying to tap into that wildness thing. Yeah. Chief is a more like leader type of, exalted type of person. So maybe that's a little bit more positive. But if a guy would say, I don't like Chiefs. I don't like the Chiefs. Let's say someone comes along and, he calls, let's say there's a guy at work. And he's Jewish. And you know what? Everyone likes to call him Rabbi.
Right.
Comes in the morning, hey, Rabbi. How you doing, Rabbi? The guy says, I don't like being called Rabbi. Well, then you can't call him Rabbi.
But I understand on an individual. But, like, example, there were schools. I think one of the schools, it was a college team up in the Northeast. It was called their nickname was the Minutemen. Mm-hmm. Well, the woman didn't like that. How should we have a masculine name? Well, there's always going to be someone who's going to complain. She didn't like to be called the Minutemen. But the majority of the people in that school like to be called the Minutemen.
Right.
Do you have to take in consideration when it's not personally about you, but about your organization or your group or your people?
Now that's a different story, because there the burden is on the individual. She didn't have to join the Minutemen.
No, it was her college. She was in her college. They're called the Minutemen.
Well, she could go to a different college. If she didn't like it, she didn't have to join the Minutemen. She didn't have to be on the team. She didn't have to be a booster of that. She didn't even have to go to that school if she didn't like it. But if she is something already, and someone else is using a name that has reference to her, then she can say, I don't like that, and I want you to stop calling me by that name.
I can understand that. The individual, I understand, but the Redskins, we're going back to the Redskins. There are probably some Indians or Native Americans or indigenous people or whatever I'm supposed to say out there that are probably offended by it. But they polled them, and the majority of them are not offended by the name Redskins.
Right. Now, I've had this situation where someone will say, hey, Jew, right? Say, hey, Jew to me. So I said, well, thank you.
Right.
I can say thank you. I can feel proud about it. But I know that there are other Jews that they don't like to be called Jew.
Right.
If someone says, hey, Jew, they are very, uncomfortable about that.
One of my favorite songs, by the way.
Yeah, right. So if you're uncomfortable about it, and that is what you are, that's a really interesting thing, because Jew could be a pejorative or it could be a positive statement. That all depends on what was behind the person who said it. So that, I don't know. But, Redskin, I think the idea was, the connotations of the Redskins was, like, we're really wild and we're going to, beat you up, meaning beat up the enemy, beat up the opposition. Maybe we'll even scalp them. But either way, we're going to win. We're going to run all over them because, we're wild Redskins. So if someone is an Indian and they're uptight about it, so then everyone else has a responsibility not to abuse that person.
So when the Florida State Seminoles or either the Atlanta Braves do the The chop, which obviously
Right.
implies, tomahawk chop, that
Right.
obviously some people get
Yeah,
offended.
I
and they
don't
have
know.
to stop.
I don't know about the tomahawk chop. As far as the Seminoles go, well, the Seminoles were a group of people that lived in that area.
Yep.
So I don't think that there's anything pejorative about referring to a team or any local institution by the name of the people that used to occupy that area.
Well, you don't think, but someone could get offended.
Hey, listen, I come from Minnesota,
Right? Yeah.
right? So they got Vikings up there.
There's not much difference between the
Okay,
Vikings and a Redskin.
So once
Not the
upon a
same.
time, they got these guys who were running around with those hats. Like Vikings, or if they were there, or they were still trying to figure out if they
were
actually were
raping
there or
and
not.
pillaging and doing everything else.
Yeah, but it seems as though historically these people were there, or at least people from those countries that they come from settled there. So they are associated with that. So I don't think Seminoles is a problem, because Seminoles were the indigenous people of that region. So if you're going to pick a name,
So were the Redskins.
well, I don't.
Cherokees, or they might have been Cherokees, they might have been Comanche.
Yeah.
But,
So I think that Redskin was always like a pejorative term for a
Right.
certain type of people. But if they had been referring to a particular tribe that lived in the area, then that would seem to me to be different. But if people say, now, if one guy says, like, I don't like that term, let's say all the Jews. All the Jews are referred to as Jew, and then some guy says, don't call me Jew, I don't like that. Well, that's his problem. That's his problem. But if you see, and I guess this would have to be something that would be determined by Native Americans. If Native Americans feel uptight by the title Redskin, then they're the ones that get to make the call if we're referring to them. I don't know who would make the call if it was on the Vikings. You'd have to find some people that would somehow identify with Vikings. Yeah, I don't know. If they have any little Vikings running around, Viking ancestors.
Well, it's probably Eric the Red, but he's probably upset already because he's called Red. So
Red.
I don't know what to do about him.
Yeah,
He's
right.
in trouble already.
So
So I got you. So in the broader sense, we're talking about Lashon Hara, and I understand, well, I guess to some point Lashon Hara, but I think you can take it to the point where it's hard to live your everyday life. I mean, and I could have a tough time. Who do I offend? Who am I? No matter what I do, and I've learned this in my life, I'm going to offend somebody. So, and maybe not just me, but other. You go out there, and we talk about midgets. Is that offensive to call somebody a midget? It might be to some.
probably.
Do I have to call them vertically challenged little people?
Probably not midget, but maybe if you use some other descriptive term, you'd really have to decide how the midget feels about being called a midget.
Well, they're usually pretty short with me, so I can't discuss
Listen,
that. but-
even if my name is Benjamin,
Right.
and I walk in and you say, hey, Benji, how are you? Now, when I grew up as a little kid, that's what everyone called me. They call me Benji. I like that. I could see the next guy, but you know what? No one called me Benny.
Right.
And you know what? To this day, I don't like when people call me Benny. I don't like Benny, Don't call me Benny. Call me Benji? Okay, not Benny. Why? Because that's what they call me. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. It's not like one's any better than the other. But that's why I like it. You're talking to me. You're talking about me. That's when. Now, the only question could be if, when I'm referring to the football team, am I talking about that guy? So they think, yes, you are referring to me. So, that's, I guess, where the issue might be, is people would say, I'm not referring to you. I'm referring to someone else. However, the picture of the guy, like this picture up here, he looks kind of like, Indians, but at least nowadays when they dress up, in their, when they do ritual ceremonies and things like that. That is sort of who they are.
But no one on the team really looks like that, as far as I know. I mean, they're just, I've seen most of them.
Yeah, except I guess I can't see them too much. All you see is little logos on their helmets. Yeah.
Something like Argentina, they have they stuff that look like feathers, but it's the hair that coming out of the back. But no, other than that, they really don't look like that. So I mean,
Right.
we're not referring to that individual on the team as that. But you're saying it's the individual living somewhere out in the Midwest that was an Indian or is an Indian and used to dress that way his grandparents did.
And still I would think, let's say they had a team that all the guys grew beards and they painted their helmets black.
Right.
And they started calling themselves like the Stettelizers or something like that,
okay.
you know? And I would assume, and the whole idea is like they like to like, you know, we're the Stettel boys and we like beat up the opposition. I could see that I don't like that.
Definitely negotiate our contracts better than their teams, I would assume.
Right. You know, that's one of the things. They never come up with Jewish nicknames when he talks about football.
They do
teams.
for the owner. They just don't for the team.
Right.
That is what happens. But I understand it. I just think in Lashon Hara in itself, and I think this is a great example when we're talking about the Redskins, it's a lot more complicated than it sounds, because I mean, I understand not to call you a jerk. I mean, that's going to offend you. That's easy, and I understand not to talk about you behind your back and call you a jerk. But to call you Benny, I wouldn't have known. I would have never known.
Right,
and
that's why the laws of Lashon Hara say don't use nicknames
at all.
At all, because that nickname might be something that I don't like.
Even the Miami Dolphins.
And there's no way that you would know that I don't like Benny, but I'm okay with Benji, but I don't like Benny. Like, how would anyone know that, right? But therefore, skip the nicknames. Now, you know, as a matter of fact, you know, I was at SeaWorld not too long ago, and like the Dolphins were definitely in an uproar. They were thinking of like getting ready to protest this.
I guess that's a good point.
Right.
You know, so anybody could be unhappy.
Right. Yeah. And especially what really got them is that a lot of the sports writers call them the fish. And they're mammals.
They're definitely not fish.
And they're not fish, and they were really insulted by the fact that these sports writers have been calling them the fish instead of mammals, and they're mammals, and they're dolphins, and all that type of stuff, right?
But you know, you're getting it. You know, you're getting it kind of tough here. I mean, I call my employees. You're an account representative. You're a salesman. You're a clerk. You're you know what I mean? What do you do?
Right. Well, that's a title, and if a person doesn't like that title, they can go work somewhere else. You know, that's what you do. If I'm the guy, if I'm the supervisor, I'm the supervisor. And if I'm an accountant, I'm an accountant. Like, everyone knows that. That's not, that is a descriptive term. But a nickname is sort of like, includes sort of my feelings towards you. And that is where we have to be careful. And if that's the case, by the way, if it's talking about nicknames, then you have to broaden that out and think about all the different ways that we speak to other people and all the things that we say in our interaction during the course of a day. How do we need to address people in such a way that they feel respected, even though they might have all kinds of, like, you know, sensitivities?
Well, that's a tough thing. I mean, there were cultures, and probably still today, like the Welsh. They used to, their nicknames were part of their names. Like if he was the bookkeeper, his name was Jeff Bookkeeper. That's the thing. If he minded, if he was the guy to clean up the sewer, he was John Sewer. I mean, that's a tough thing to do.
That's right. And they used to refer to everyone, even in, I know in Yiddish circles, let's say in my grandparents' time, everyone was referred to by some descriptive term. My grandfather was tall, so he was called Alter the Heicher, the tall guy. You know, there was tall and short and black and white. And there was one guy, I had a relative, I never even understood this until years later. His name was Yossa, which was from Joseph, but they call him Yossa, Mariasas. His wife was Mariasa. So he was Yossa Mariasas, like he belonged. I always thought that was his last name. I grew up as a little kid. I always thought, but everyone called him Yossa Mariasas because she was obviously like a prominent lady, and he like was along with her.
Well,
that was his name, Yossa Mariasas. Yossa, who belonged to Mariasa, you know.
Oh.
That was now I don't think, however, that anyone ever stopped and asked him if he's comfortable with that.
Right.
That was just the facts. But that doesn't mean that people who were doing it was right.
So the Lashon Hara thing is tough. I thought I understood Lashon Hara. I'm not saying I got over Lashon Hara and I don't do it, but I thought I understood it at least.
So Lashon Hara really is defined by the person it's being spoken about. You know, if you say that, like you say to me, like, you know, well, he's not a very good accountant. So you say, like, what does he matter? He's a rabbi. Why would he be insulted by someone saying he's not a good accountant? I mean, he doesn't make his living doing that. He doesn't purport to be a good accountant. He's not an accountant. He didn't train to be an accountant. He trained to be a rabbi. So I say he's not a good accountant. Well, of course. You know what? Even that, I might be uptight about that. Maybe I thought that I am a good accountant. And maybe I just don't like the fact that someone points out that I'm not good at anything.
I'm with you. Wow.
I don't like it.
Sensitivity now becomes the rules all, because if you weren't sensitive, I can call you a bad accountant. But since you are sensitive, I can't do that. So
Right.
we have to be considerate, more than considerate, because your definition of lashon hara is like killing somebody. So we have to be more than considerate of somebody's sensitivities.
Right.
We have to live our lives by your sensitivities.
Now, in our society today, of course, we've got like sensitivities galore.
Right. Everybody's
there is no end to people's sensitivities. But if you really, really look at it, and you'd see that people would spend a little bit more time focusing on addressing other people or thinking about other people in a respectful way. How would that person feel respected? How would that person feel? How would that person like to be addressed? As a matter of fact, sometimes you check in. How would you like to be addressed? Do you mind if I call you this? Sometimes the guy will say, no, I don't mind. Or, yes, I do. Do you mind if, hey, Benjamin, do you mind if I call you Benny? I said, yeah. You mind if I call you Benji? No, not at all.
Okay.
Okay, that's my thing. I don't know. That's where I got it from.
So this is so you no longer, I don't know if you ever rooted for the Redskins anyway, but you no longer are going to refer to them as the Redskins, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I've never really thought. I guess you're right. I guess I'm gonna have to delete that.
I got a list. I put. I can't remember what I wrote in the promo. I think I was gonna root for the Washington androgynous. Can't remember the other words. Peaceniks.
Well, I guess from now on we'll just have to root for the Washington Football Organization. Right.
Very good. All right, I'm with you.
The Washington Footballers.
So I can tell you this, I'm very keen on of lashon hara, and I'm very keen on being careful of it. And I'm not saying that I'm always perfect at it. This one makes it tougher.
Right.
Being careful about everybody's sensitivities that you don't totally agree with makes it harder. Because I don't think I'm offending you, but I don't think it even should offend you. But I guess I have to be concerned that it does. I got a lot of thinking to do, because I'm offending a lot of people probably every day.
Right. Well, listen, there's a lot of things that people, I keep getting back to that term Jew. Like, Jew could be a pejorative, Jew could be a positive. And many times people will say it in the negative. If you have a lot of pride in it, but it still is it is by itself a descriptive and sort of non-partisan, neither negative or positive type of term. It's just a Jew. It's what someone is. Now, you could have put a lot of attachment to it, but I think Redskin carries with it a pretty particular type of image. As a kid who grew up in the Cowboys and Indian days, and basically what Redskins did was they scalped them.
Yep.
Right? They were always scalping people. So I can understand how they think that they got a bad rap on that. I mean, maybe they did scalp them, but if they did scalp them, if they did scalp them in the past, I think the current guys want to get away from that. And if they didn't scalp them in the past, then I think the current guys are certainly uptight about the fact that they got tagged with this negative image.
All right. Well, I can't argue with any of that, and hail to those. Hail to those Native American sensitive people.
Right. And by the way, when you're down by 7 and there's one last play and he goes back to throw, that is not a hail.
No, that's not a hail.
No,
it's not.
No, that's something else. That is a
final
try.
A final attempt.
That's right.
Final good try.
Right, but you better start leaving Mary out of this, because all of a sudden, man, we're going to hear from the Vatican.
Right, that's true too. Wow, so many things.
Desecrating poor Mary.
I don't even think my problem is throughout my day I'm going to be doing more work thinking about who I'm going to offend with everything I say than actually getting anything done. Right. It's going to be kind of tough for me.
Okay, well, okay.
Well, next week we'll think a lot clearer, and we'll be back with something more sensitive for everybody in mind.
Right. Tell us how you'd like us to refer to you.
Exactly.